Anyway, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Historic Society, and if anyone was here last week, you saw part one of John's presentation on the Gravity Railroad, and tonight it's going to be the second part.
The second part.
From Honesdale back.
Yeah, while you guys are in Honesdale, hopefully you went to the restaurants and you visited the museum, sat in the Gravity car, you know.
Yeah, so we appreciate everybody coming. As you know, so we can't do this type of thing if we don't get participation and the response from the town here. So anyway, we're always interested and very graciously accept any donations you'd like to make to keep the building going and open and get people like John. John is an exception to the rule because he doesn't actually charge us. Whereas when we have musical acts...
I don't get paid?
You don't get paid. You
really?
Well, I already told you.
I don't get paid?
I said, we're not paying you. And you said, okay. Remember?
Oh.
Remember that conversation?
Well, if I don't get paid, don't I get your firstborn at least or something like that? Or
Firstborn is way too old.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, John's going to carry on. Now, we like to... Oh, the one thing we like to say is that if you could hold your questions till the end of John's presentation so he could keep going through it, and then after there'll be questions and answers after you're done. How's that?
Okay.
Is that better?
That's good. Well, but also, like, this is meant to be a visual experience. You see, the Gravity hasn't been around for 126 years, so we can't ride the Gravity. We can't see what the Gravity is all about. And the photographer, Ludolf Hensel, you know, he did a whole series about the entire route of the Gravity. He did 67 stereo views where he rode the Gravity and he took the photos, and I've been spending my whole life trying to accumulate these. There's, like I said, there's 67. I've found 45 of them, and I've tried to fill in other areas. What you're going to see tonight, in addition to the Gravity photos, in 1916, the D&H, after they converted the Gravity to a steam railroad from Carbondale to Honesdale, they did they sent a photographer out and a surveyor out to look at areas that were previously the Gravity. So we're going to see some of those, because what those are going to show you is how they changed the contour of the land to accommodate the Gravity. So we're going to see that.
All right, I'll get out of your way, John. You can get started.
Okay. So as you guys remember, you know, we stated we're stuck in Honesdale right now. And so we're going to get on the train again, same cars, the open air car, the closed cars, and this time it's a three passenger train where we have the canal down here, and we're going to ride up plane 13. Those of you who remember me saying last night, there's a plane 12 and a half. That where when you got to Honesdale, they raised the coal back up the hill to be able to dump it to create the large coal pile. So what you see here is, this is plane 12 and a half crossing 13, and this is a walkway just to cross the Gravity so nobody gets hit with cars. So we're going to leave Honesdale. Now we're at the top of plane. Now we saw this from down here, the view down here, and actually this trestle down here that you see, this is where the trestle was located, where the Stourbridge Lion ran, the original, the first locomotive in the United States. This is where the trestle was located. I don't know if this is the same trestle, because this would have been many, many years later. You know, it may have been a replaced, or it could be the original trestle. I don't know. But when we saw the one picture last time, it was looking up the hill from down this area and looking up to the top of the hill. So you see, we ride the plane all the way up the hill to the top of plane 13, and we're looking down on Honesdale. Now, beyond plane 13, again, this is part of that 1916 series that I mentioned to you. There were remnants of the Gravity. You see the railroad ties and everything, and here it shows this where the Honesdale electric plant was built. But again, beyond the top of the plane, you see how, again, we're going to see a lot of loose material, because remember, to create the Gravity, they had to build these inclined planes, and they used a lot of the culm from the mines that they had, because they had to fill the areas. Now, a lot of times, this is around the area of plane number 14. A lot of railroads, you'll hear them talk about a horseshoe curve, where, you know, because of the contour of the land or because of rivers or whatever, they will build a long sweeping curve. So unfortunately, the track is gone, but you see this long sweeping curve that after it left Honesdale, they created a horseshoe curve in the Gravity. I don't know why they went to this extent, because as you can see, again, this is all fill. Why you wouldn't just go straight across. Again, it's one of those questions, you know, unless they didn't own the land and, you know, somebody didn't want this filled in, but they created a horseshoe curve leaving Honesdale on their way back to Waymart. And again, the only remnants of it is, well, again, this was 1916. There's probably nothing left now, but at least we can see that it existed. And again, the culm pile, again, this is all filled. This whole area was filled in. Now, in the early gravity, before, again, they didn't have all the culm, I was reading a story where when the culm started wearing away, when this, you know, an area where this started wearing away, there was actually a trestle underneath. So a wooden trestle was there originally, and then to fill it in, dump the culm around it, because again, a wooden trestle is going to rot, you could have maintenance and things like that, but the culm itself, the waste from the coal mines, you don't have that problem. But it was interesting to find out that when, you know, the culm was wearing away through erosion, it exposed the original trestles that were underneath. Now, here we are in Sealyville, the light track. This is the Birdsall Mills. This is Mr. Birdsall's house up here. And the gravity, remember when we talked about it last time, between Waymart and Honesdale, coming from Waymart to Honesdale, there were no more lifting planes. It was just the cars ran because it was relatively level. And they they changed the contour of the land to accommodate that. So what we're going to see here in a second, again, this is the original gravity track. When the railroad was converted in 1899 from gravity to steam, you could use, to see again, this is the same view, here's the Birdsall Mills, the same track, but we have a steam locomotive, narrow gauge, hauling gravity cars over that same area, so between 1899 and 1931, so you're looking at the exact same adapted for use with the steam railroad, because again, you didn't have the incline, it was level enough that you could run the steam railroad. And here we move on to Prompton. And here we're showing, you know, it's hard to see here, but again, you see there's two occasions where the light track and the heavy track cross each other. And as I said last time, the gravity crossed over many, many times. So they had to build bridges and trestles because, again, you didn't have switches at that time, or, you know, live switches that you could electronically, you know, if you had a switch back then, it was all manually run. So here we are, and forgive me, I don't remember what the building, it's been a while since I've done this presentation, I don't remember what the building was in Prompton. But we're moving back through Prompton up to Waymart. Now we're here. This is plane number 16, and again, you saw this view coming from, when we were coming from Carbondale to Honesdale. This is again where on plane 16, these cars coming from Waymart on their way to Honesdale, the empty cars heading up plane 16 on their way back to Waymart. And here is, okay, so here you're at the bottom of the plane, here at the top of the plane looking back at plane number 16. This photo was a mystery to me for years because it's the last view, number 1166 is the last view in the series, and when I said 67 views, again, number 1100 is the first one, so that one you have to count, so it's 67. McGarry Avenue, I was asking historians, because they said, oh, they thought that was in Carbondale, but the way Hensel did his photos, he did them like, one of the next photos you're going to see, 1165, I think it is downtown Waymart. So he didn't jump around, is what I'm saying. So everybody's telling me this is in, and obviously this does not look like Carbondale. So again, through a little more research, I found this map of, you know, actually I went to buy maps up at the Wayne County Historical Society. And here's the area where that stereo view was taken. And I'm looking, you have P. McGarry's house and J. McGarry's house. So because I guess this is the street, this was McGarry Avenue or McGarry Street at the time, that's why it was McGarry Avenue on the stereo view. So that identifies it as around this area here where the McGarry properties were. Now, we're at the, we're approaching Waymart. Plane 17 is the last plane before we get to Waymart. This is the first picture I have that has, these are the knuckles, as they were called, that they were spring-loaded so that when cars came up the plane on their way back to Waymart, you didn't want them rolling back and killing anybody. So you have these, cars go over, and as soon as the car goes over, it pops up to stop them from going. Now, I know I said I didn't want to talk about technical aspects, but typically on a plane you have the lifting cable and the trailing cable. Here we have only the one cable. Now there's a loose cable down here, so I don't know if this is in the process of the cable is returning. I'm not sure. But it's one of the few photos I've had where you only have one cable at the top of the plane where there's normally the two. And as we move further on, again, as I mentioned, there are mysteries of the gravity. You just saw, at the bottom of the plane, you could see Keens Lake, right? We are now at the top of the hill on our way to Waymart. And I've talked to some Wayne County historians. You have a passenger platform at the top of the plane. And it's unclear, like if you were visiting Keens Lake, you would get on the train at the bottom of the plane. You know, how would you get to the top of the plane? Because again, look, it goes the full length, so you could get multiple cars here and load and empty cars at the top of the plane. Again, it's one of those mysteries I have yet to solve. And you know, again, I've talked to a friend of mine who's like the ultimate Wayne County historian. He says, I don't know why you would have had a passenger platform at the top of plane 17. So we're still on our way to Waymart. And again, plane number 17 remnants, the plane you just saw. Look at the amount of fill that had to be put there to accommodate that plane. I mean, they really had to change the contour of the land to accommodate these inclined planes so they could run the gravity. And here we have, you're in downtown Waymart, and this is Waymart again. As I said last time, when the gravity passed through towns, through Carbondale, through, we're going to see some more pictures of trestles through the towns, they tended to be above, I don't know whether to avoid them being interfering with horses and people and whatever, but coming through Waymart, it's set up in a high trestle, and here you had to access the trestle. There was a walkway here. And again, this is Hensel 1165. Like I said, McGarry Avenue was 1166. That's how I was able to identify McGarry Avenue as being in Waymart. And again, now we saw this previously. Here's a loaded train on its way to Honesdale. It's going to be released, and you can see the length of these trains. And this is the track coming back. You left plane 17 and you're coming into Waymart, and you came into Waymart over this trestle and came to rest down here near the station to be attached to the bottom of plane 18, which again, you started the lift up to Farview. And here we are, we're still in our passenger cars. We dropped the open air car somewhere, I don't know where. But here we are, getting ready to go up plane 18 on our way back. And I know I didn't want to, again, say I didn't want to talk about, but here's another one of those counterweights, so that we're still trying to figure out exactly how they worked at the bottom of the planes. Here we are again, plane 12 going down when we were going to Honesdale, plane 18 coming up the plane on our way up to Farview with the same two passenger cars. And again, the remnants, all this was fill at the time that they had to accommodate the plane, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to run the railroad. Then we're moving up plane 19 on our way Farview will be up here, Farview Station, but here we're climbing the mountain. Remember, you have to do everything in steps. You cannot make the whole trip up the side of the mountain on one plane. So we're taking our steps up the mountain on our trip back. So here we are, top of plane 19. We're coming over here, we're heading up plane 20. We came down plane 9 on our way to Waymart. We're heading up plane 20. Now, there was always a rule about the gravity. Again, this is one of the earliest things I learned, and it talked about how if you had a plane on the heavy track where you're hauling full coal cars, you needed 3 stationary engines in the engine house, and when you were on the light track, you only needed 2 because you weren't lifting heavy loads. Well, I got my magnifying glass out, and I don't know if you've ever seen, there's the students either at Wallenpaupack or Honesdale, the shop students, made a facsimile gravity car to specs, and it was sitting at the visitor center in Honesdale. Those cars were heavy. There are 10 empty cars being hauled up at once, which surprises me on the light track, because again, the light track is defined as we're only lifting light loads. So even though they're empty, but 10 cars in a row, so this kind of surprises me that 10 cars are at once are going up the side of the mountain. This is something you don't usually see. And again, throughout the gravity, people tend to forget you have the gravity as a one-way loop, but throughout the gravity and other railroads, you will have spurs. Like, this track, I mean, they might be, there's a lot of lumber here. This might be a lumber mill or whatever, so there's side tracks to bring product to the gravity. You have to bring the coal to the gravity. You have to bring the lumber to the gravity so that you can put it on the main line. So we're climbing the hill up to Waymart, sorry, up to Farview, and here we're back at the Farview station. We saw this plane number 9 when we were coming to Honesdale. Now, again, so many places on the gravity was in close proximity. You had the light track near the heavy track. Just, while we're, I'll wait till we get to Shepherd's Crook. And again, you saw these before. While we're at Farview, we can go up the tower, or we can get our picture taken. And this is, now that it's a little bigger, you can see this is a painting of the Farview station, so that you can prove you were there if you were lying to your family saying, I was at the Farview station. Well, you have a tintype that you can prove that you were there. And again, the tower, my favorite picture of the tower with the guy standing on top. He wasn't satisfied with seeing the 4 states from here. He wanted to try to see a 5th state by climbing up to the top of the tower. And when you're in the tower, this is your view. And again, if you remember from last week, this is Connecticut. But yes, we're looking back at where we just came from. Now, the only part of the gravity that's in Fell Township where I live is a place called Shepherd's Crook. Remember, when you're climbing the mountain, we took 8 steps. We had to build 8 planes to get up the mountain, right? From Carbondale up to around Gibney's restaurant. If you wanted to go down the mountain, you would have to build descending planes. Well, instead of doing that, when you left the Farview station, you could ride the gravity from Farview all the way to Archibald. Now, the way they did that was they needed to build a you had to go downhill gradually. So here's the heavy track. This is the track when we left Carbondale, right, on our way to Honesdale. Coming back, here's the light track. And they built this sweeping curve. This is called Shepherd's Crook. Now, earlier we saw a horseshoe curve. A lot of railroads had horseshoe curves. But with a shepherd's, if you remember, if you saw a picture of a shepherd with his staff, it's not just like a cane. It actually, because they use it to grab hold of sheep to move them. So the staff comes up, swings out, swings in a big circle, and comes around. You're almost doing a full circle. So hence they call it the shepherd's crook. And actually, that's what this was over here. You start off straight, you swing out to the right, swing in this big sweeping curve, and then come back. And we're going to see pictures of this. But again, you're making a long sweeping curve as opposed to building step down planes so that you could come down into the Lackawanna Valley. And if you remember when I talked about passenger service on the Gravity, how people could ride up to plane number 2 and then switch over to the light track so they could ride the Gravity down to Oliphant instead of going all the way to Honesdale. Well, after they built Shepherd's Crook, you see here's another switchback. So you went up plane number 5. When you got to the engine house of plane number 5, you could then get on a car that would then go all the way out to Shepherd's Crook, and actually there was picnic grounds and different things out here. So again, I don't know how they managed all this, because the Gravity did put out timetables. Well, a timetable was for 4 specific stops on the Gravity. Well, obviously, if you're getting on or if maybe the car was designated to come up and then go out to Shepherd's Crook, so maybe the entire car came up, switched back to the light track from the heavy track, and swung out here, and then came back and down to Archibald. And again, we're going to see in a minute, you don't have to go down to Archibald because there were other switchbacks. There was actually a switchback outside of Carbondale where the light cars that came back, that had to get back to Carbondale, didn't have to go all the way down to Archibald. They could actually switch back to the heavy track, or sorry, the light, no, actually it was the heavy track at that point in time, because from Oliphant up to Carbondale is heavy track again because you've got full cars. So the cars coming back that had to go to Carbondale could switch back, go to Carbondale. The ones that had to go to Archibald, Oliphant, German, whatever, could continue on the light track. And we'll see that in a second. And here's Shepherd's Crook that we just talked about. And as you can see, again, this was so pronounced at the time. People that were on a train, if they were on a long train, because sometimes they would add passenger cars to the back of coal trains or whatever, you know, they would have mixed trains. So there were stories of people who were riding the railroad right here, right? And they would see cars down here, and they thought it was a completely different railroad because they couldn't imagine that this railroad that was so close to them coming in the other direction was part of the train they were on. But again, you're starting the sweep out to the right. There is a rock cut out here. And it's actually a beautiful rock cut. I mean, it's changed over the years. You know, things do change. But when I walked up there, maybe 30 years ago, the rock cut is there, and the trees grew over. And when you walk into it, it's so quiet and everything. It's like a cathedral. It was just absolutely beautiful. And so here, if we were on the train right here and we turned around, this is what we would see if we turned around and looked, you know, that we left Farview and we're coming down into Shepherd's Crook. And again, this is one of my favorite pictures, especially to show kids. Because, as I said before, the Gravity Railroad was the inspiration for the roller coaster. You know, people loved riding the Gravity. It was extremely popular. So I always say to kids, you know, have you been on a roller coaster? And when you get on a roller coaster, they strap you in, and you've got the bar down. So you are very secure in a roller coaster. This is a passenger car. You see the benches. Do you see any straps? Do you see any front to that car? And people have challenged me. They've said, oh no, they would never use this for passengers. I mean, there's no way. It is just not safe enough. This was an outing, leaving Waymart on its way up to Farview. This was a church outing. They are all sitting. Look at them packed on these open-air cars. So yes, they did use these for passengers. But, you know, it's like there's no front to the car, and there is a brake wheel, but again, you have no way, you know, centrifugal force, you're going around sweeping curves, but look at all the people piled on these cars ready to go up to Farview. Actually, I don't know if you remember last time I was saying there was a day in 1898 in Farview that they were having an outing, that there were 14,763 visitors to Farview in that one day. They sold that many tickets. I'm wondering if this is that day, because, I mean, that is a lot of people leaving Waymart on their way up to Farview. Because again, you're on the light track, so that's why I'm sure they're heading that way. And this is looking into, this is what I'm saying, this is looking into Shepherd's Crook here. And again, now imagine this, the trees hanging over. It's just a beautiful sight. And again, in Shepherd's Crook, you have there, it's hard to see, but there's picnic tables down here. There's a guy sitting up here on a log. But, you know, I don't know how they, well, they would have to just put the brakes on, and if somebody wanted to get off, I don't know how they manage this, because if somebody said, I want to get off at Shepherd's Crook for a picnic, how do they know to pick them up again? This picture, again, was a mystery to, now, I'm from Simpson. This picture was a mystery to me for years. I could not figure this picture out. And it came with a group of pictures I bought from Carbondale. And I'm like, because you have two railroads down here. You have, the smoke and everything. I wasn't sure what these things were. And it was just like, what the heck are these pictures? So a buddy of mine loaned me that book that I was telling you about, 1916, the survey that was done of the D&H. This is when the D&H was converted to a steam railroad. Now you're thinking this is two different railroads here. This is actually one railroad, because if you remember me saying steam locomotives can only go up a 2% grade. So to accommodate that, you have to do these long switchbacks, really long switchbacks. So when you were coming from Carbondale to get to Honesdale when it was a steam railroad, you left Carbondale and went out to I don't know what to call it. It was always, help me, Bruce. It was always called the bush section of Carbondale. Like out where Valley Lanes is, above there. So you rode the railroad out to there, and then you rode up to White's Crossing. This is the track coming from Carbondale. So you came up this way, because here's the Shepherd's Crook. The fill is still there. So the Shepherd's Crook we just saw, you would come from Farview here, swing around, and come down here to go on to Archibald. So you'd come up from Carbondale on this track, then you'd switch back. The train would be switched to this track going on, which would then go out to South Canaan. Again, it went all the way out to South Canaan to accommodate the hill coming down to Waymart. But again, see this spot right here? Let me go back a second. Can I get, oh, wrong way, you didn't see that. See this mound of culm here? That's the part of Shepherd's Crook after they took the track out, and you're looking down at the New York Lake Erie and Western and the New York O&W coming out of Simpson, where I live. But until he gave me that book with the picture that was the next picture, I had no idea where this was and how this fit into the Carbondale, because I wasn't focusing on this, which is what I should have been focusing on. Oh, sorry. So again, this is right there, actually where that X is where I would have been standing looking down at the railroads. And the smoke you saw in the distance was actually coal breakers as we were approaching Vanling and Forest City and Richmonddale. Now, we've left Shepherd, this is leaving Shepherd's Crook here. This is plane number 3, which we're heading on last time on our way up to Honesdale. And if you remember on the map where I showed you, the switchback to Shepherd's Crook was above plane number 5, so the long sweeping, the Shepherd's Crook part of the track swept out and came back and crossed plane number 3. So these guys are on their way to Honesdale. We're waving them to them saying, we're going back now to Carbondale. So here's leaving Shepherd's Crook. This photo, you see the cars are derailed, and you see this drop-off right here? This is beyond Shepherd's Crook, above Carbondale. Now, I don't have a copy of it, but there was a photo when the gravity stopped operating. You could not use these cars anymore. They were a narrow gauge car. They were designed for the gravity use. To get all well, iron at the time, it was steel or iron, whatever, they burn the cars. So I have, there was a picture I saw years ago, couldn't get a copy of it, where they were dumped over a hillside and they were set afire so they could recover all the metal. And so this is outside of Carbondale, and I don't know what the significance, one of my favorite parts of this whole picture is, and you can't see it here, there's a guy here holding a gun and a rabbit that he killed. He's hanging by the ears. Why they felt the need to include him in this picture, or why the photographer thought, you know, somebody told me as a joke, maybe the rabbit derailed the cars. I said, I don't think so. You know, rabbits are not that. Well, I shouldn't say that. If you've ever seen that, what is it, the Monty Python movie with the killer rabbit? It's possible. But again, you see all these cars. This is a long train of cars. There's no other reason to stop and derail them here other than this is where we're going to dump them over the hillside and start burning them to recover it. And this is what I mentioned earlier. There's so you have the gravity railroad here, and then you have this switchback where, again, you can meet up with the track coming from German back to Carbondale. So if you have coal cars that are coming back that have to get to the Racketbrook coal breaker or whatever, instead of going all the way to Archibald and coming back, or all the way to Oliphant and coming back, you switch back to the heavy track, bring those cars. Any cars that have to continue on the light track down to Archibald, Peckville, whatever, can continue on. And for my German guy here, we have the Edgerton Coal Company and the Edgerton Coal Company, and there was, I thought, Edgerton Coal, there's Edgerton mentioned again there. I'm looking for a breaker. I thought I saw, I can't see it. The good news is, this is the based atlas from 1894. This is one of the things I sold Cody, so the next generation can look for the things I haven't been able to find. I'm sorry, what?
If the circle's up in the upper right hand where it says Carbondale, if that's the roundhouses, wouldn't the breaker be slightly to the right up there? If that's the roundhouses, the Carbondale breaker would be nearby.
Right, well no, but I was looking for the Edgerton breaker. I've got my German contingent here, so I was looking, I didn't know if there was an Edgerton breaker in this map, because I saw all the Edgerton lease land. But yeah, and people don't realize at one time there were two roundhouses at one time in the early years of Carbondale. At one time, somebody loaned me a picture once. I don't have a copy of it, but yeah, we have the two roundhouses before the big steam one was built. And again, we're moving down to Archibald. You have the Oak Breaker, and again, some of the side tracks that had to, to get from the coal breaker to the gravity. You have the New York O&W. You have the NG Railroad. I'm not for Bruce. Any NG Railroad? Anybody?
Narrow gauge railroad.
What is it? Narrow gauge railroad?
Narrow gauge.
Okay. Because it mentioned Simpson and Company, which was one of the coal companies, so I didn't know if it was their particular railroad. And you have the Eaton Breaker. Again, you have a lot of, places where the gravity is coming in close contact with other railroads. And it's amazing when you think now we have, people complain, at least I know people who complain, sadly, I love railroads, but they'll complain of having to sit at a crossing waiting for a train to go by. Back then you had trains flying all over the place from different railroads. Oliphant, where we have the switch, we're switching from, again, Oliphant is the terminus where we're going, from the light track back to the heavy track on our way back to Carbondale. And this is Valley Junction in Oliphant. And this is something we've seen at major places in the railroad. We had the Carbondale yards where they would accumulate cars on their way going up to the railroad. We had the Waymart yards where they would build the trains on their way to Honesdale. We had the Honesdale yards where, again, they accumulated cars for the movement of coal. And you had the the Valley Junction, which is where the gravity swung back up toward Carbondale. Oh, this is Mrs. Cecilia Richards. She's getting on the train. Does anybody here know Mrs. Cecilia Richards? She's going to be famous in a minute. No? Nobody knows Cecilia Richards? Anybody? Bueller? No?
She's a union leader?
No, she's not a union leader. But she's going to be important in a minute. Not yet, though. But she's getting on the train with us in Oliphant. Okay, so now we're leaving plane number 23. We're leaving now. This is where I was saying because we were having a discussion last time about the cables. See, the cable here, the different railroads. You have the D&H gravity, you had the Pennsylvania Coal Company gravity, you had the Mauchunk Switchback Railroad. They all operated differently. Like the Mauchunk Railroad had the Barney cars, like we saw at plane number 4 last time, where this little car would come out of a hole in the ground at the bottom of the plane and actually push the cars. Well, actually, the cable is lifting the Barney cars, which is pushing the cars up the hill. You see here's where the lifting cable that's going around the drum at the engine house attaches to the first car. And this is what has to be detached when it gets to the top. And here, you were asking me, Bruce, last time about the wheels. This is, again, one of those things I don't know how they did, because you have the different sets of wheels sitting on axles that are set in the ground, right? And people were asking me, well, did the cable run around the wheels, like get to the top of the plane and then around the wheels? And I'm thinking, well, how would you do that? Because between, like, here's a set of wheels. Now you have the ties and the fill between. So how would the cable get underneath the track? Because it would have to, because these two cables in all the planes are sitting on top of the wheels. So if at some point in time they are getting underneath, how are they getting underneath, and how would you, again, is there piping? I don't know. This is one of those things that, again, I haven't been able to solve. But again, you see clearly here that the cable here is attached to the car. It's not a continuous cable like we were talking about roller coasters. A roller coaster has a continuous chain that grabs onto the car and lifts it up. So again, this is one of the best pictures of how the car is attached at the front, and the trailing cable. The lifting cable is up in the air because it's attached to the car. The trailing cable is still laying down on the track. We get to Peckville, and again, everybody knows I love breakers in the 1800s, because if you look at coal breakers in the 1800s, you don't find two of them alike. It's amazing that, this one's built on a hillside. So much going on here. I mean, what I think they did was they built a mechanism, and then they built a skin around whatever mechanism they built, because that's the only reason I could figure of building, like, I mean, nowadays everything is so boxy, but the breakers were just had such, character to them. Okay, that's Grassy Island. Again, now we're in Peckville, and again, crossing over, here we have the Ontario and Western, crosses the gravity. Let's see. Forgive me, the eyesight is not what it used to be. Here we have plane number 22, plane number 24, which I think is wrong, because you can't go from 22 to 24. I think the map is wrong. I think it meant to be 23. I think we have an error in the map, because you can't, where is plane 23 here? So, but I think we have a misnumbering problem that's just on the map. Again, you see all the activity, the Gravity Railroad, the loaded track, the light track, crossing over here, crossing over there, Grassy Island Breaker, Mount Jessup Colliery, Pierce Breaker. I mean, you see the amount of activity. It's amazing the amount of activity we had in the Lackawanna Valley when we were mining coal. I wish we had picked. Okay, now we're in Peckville. I've always said that the ride on the Gravity was the closest thing that people in the 1800s could have to flying. Okay, there were so many trestles, so many high works. High works is another word for trestle. But the Gravity crossed the Lackawanna River multiple times. So this is why people enjoyed riding the Gravity so much. I mean, the thing I love about railroads, when you're in a rail car, I mean, compare this. When you're on the Casey Highway, right? You've got 2 lanes, 2 shoulders, a median. You're clearing off a whole lot of area. When you're in a train car, you can't see the wheels, you can't see anything but what's outside the window. And what you see outside the window when you're riding one of these cars over one of these trestles is just air, and you're looking at the river. You're looking at the river from an elevated position. You're looking at Waymart from an elevated position. You're looking at Carbondale from an elevated position. It had to be exciting for them. I mean, because what would they have at the time that was comparable? So you have the inclined bridges here in Peckville. This is our host, by the way. This is Ludolf Hensel. He's the guy who took the pictures. He's in more than one of the pictures. In one of the other ones, you'll see he's got a pocket watch because I think he's timing the exposure. Am I blocking you, Kevin? I'm sorry. So here we have, again, you see the 2 cables, the lifting cable and the trailing cable coming to the top of the plane, goes beyond the top of the plane to where it goes underground to the drum. But you're looking down into Peckville on plane 24. I don't know how much, I mean, the plains in the Lackawanna Valley, I don't know how much they had to build up. You saw up in Wayne County, they had to put in a lot of fill. I don't know whether the contour of the land was just more favorable in the Lackawanna Valley, because, it doesn't look like there's a lot of loose fill. It looks like, the contour of the land was more favorable to the Gravity. Here we're looking farther down the plane. You see, here we're coming from, here's a crossover on the Gravity. Here we have the plane coming from the other direction to the bottom of plane number 24 that you just saw the top of. And here's Louis again. See him, here he is with his pocket watch. And this is the first view we have of the 2 cables coming beyond the top of the plane. Again, you still can't see where they've gone into the ground. But somewhere in here, the guy who works in this shack is the guy who has to disengage the cable from the cars. Bless you. We're still moving up toward German. We're at plane number 25. Again, contour of the land, it looks like all they had to do was clear trees pretty much. It doesn't look like they had to put in a lot of fill. Now we're in Archibald, and again, we see another set of the trestles crossing the Lackawanna River, where the Gravity on both sides is crossing the river. If I'm correct, this would be, where's Dale? Dale?
Yeah.
That day I went down there for the tour of when we took the hike in Archibald. Is this the D&H main line?
I think it is.
Okay, so this would be where the D&H main line, okay. Thank you, Dale. And we have, again, another breaker, massive breaker in Archibald. Unfortunately, I wish he would have put, all he says is breaker in Archibald on the back. See, Hensel, the good thing about Hensel is he put a list of the photo, of what was on the photos, he put on the back of the photos, the whole list that he was selling, but he doesn't identify the breaker. Now, we already saw a Grassy Island breaker, so I'm not sure this is an Edgerton, by the way, is it?
I don't think so. I think it's White Oak.
White Oak? Okay. Who is it? What is it?
White Oak.
White Oak?
Yeah.
The gravity slope. Let's see, let's see. Does it, I'm looking to see. Hang on. Eric, how do you, it's my eyesight, it's not there is, yeah, it says White Oak slope there, so yeah. Okay. Well, now you got the Eaton breaker right across, you have the Eaton breaker over here.
It's on the other side.
Okay.
It's up on Powell's development now, on that hill.
Now, nothing against German, okay? I don't know why. Louis Hensel took such beautiful pictures. This is not one of my favorites. I mean, this is the best thing he could take of German?
Can't even see it.
Well, that's my point. It's like, Louis, I mean...
Notch going up into Route 107.
Right, yeah, here. I mean, this, I don't know if this is anything, or is that a building, or... But it's plane 27 in German, but it's, you know, I bought it to complete my, you know, to try to complete my set of Hensels, but it's not one of my favorite pictures. But something is about to happen. You remember Cecilia Richards that we got on in the train in Oliphant? She brings the train to a halt. No, something more significant. 2 passengers without tickets joined the train in German. Dina and Catherine, she gave birth. She was on the way. She arrived from Europe, from Wales. Her husband has been working in Carbondale. Okay, so she arrived, and she was coming up to Carbondale to meet him. Boy, is he going to be surprised. So they stopped the train, and and she gave birth. And what is the chance of you're on a railroad called the Delaware and Hudson. You give birth to twin girls. So the management of the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company took this as a major opportunity as a marketing tool. The parents, well, you see their first names are Dina and Catherine Richards, but the middle names they gave them were Dina Delaware and Catherine Hudson. Okay? The management of the, now this is what we're going to look for on eBay. This is what if anybody knows any coin collectors, there is an area of coin collecting called love tokens. Back in the 1800s, it was a popular practice to take coins, carve the one side of the coin with a message for someone you loved, okay? Or anything, put your initials, anything, but the general term is love tokens. The management of the D&H took 2 Liberty-seated $50, and they carved the one commemorating the event with the child's name, Dina Delaware Richards, Catherine Hudson Richards, the date and everything, and the event. I would love to know what happened to those, because to me, that would be a significant part of Gravity history. A birth on the Gravity, and it's twin girls, and you name them Dina Delaware and Catherine Hudson Richards. So that's what, see, now you'll never forget Cecilia Richards. This was her contribution to the history of the Gravity. And it happened in German. Okay, so now here's the Carbondale, the 2 roundhouses. Here's plane 28, the last plane. Well, the last plane before you get to Carbondale. It's not the 28th plane, because as we saw in the presentation, there's named planes, there's plane 12 and a half. There's other parts that you could call a plane, you know, that plane number 4 where you lift the coal to the back of the breaker. So here we're entering Carbondale. Here we are on the top of plane 28. This is on River Street. It's the Episcopal Church, right? Yeah. The Episcopal Church on River. Now it's changed. Obviously, you don't have the tower. And here's, again, possibly Hensel or one of his workers, because why else would he be sitting there? See, a lot of these guys got in the picture for some reason, but we're looking down on Carbondale. This is one of my favorite pictures. When I found this, I know you guys aren't photo collectors, but Thomas Johnson took the earliest photos of the Lackawanna Valley in 1860. And one of the things that people look for who collect photographs are pictures of the photographer's wagon. Here's his wagon. It says Johnson Stereoptic Views, Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is like finding gold for me, because it's not only a picture of his wagon, of him. This is the top of plane 28. Okay? Now, remember I said it's questionable of how many planes there were, because what do you call a plane? Now, here's the lifting plane. This is coming up. This is where you would lift to the top of the plane 28. The car is coming from German. This is a side, like a storage plane, because they would accumulate trains here and then send them. You see this train is on its way over, we're going to see it in a second, the trestle to downtown Carbondale. But here's where this gets complicated, and this is where the operation of the gravity confuses me. It's hard to see on here, but if you saw the picture in real life, there's another lifting cable over here. So you've got, this is the lifting cable over here, lifting them coming from German up to Carbondale. What is this doing over here? Well, as it turns out, here's another plane from the other side. How do you manage having lifting planes for the same engine house coming from two different directions? This is coming from the Colebrook Colliery, which was up in the D&H yards. Here's the train you saw on its way going over the High Works trestle on its way to our starting point of plane number 1. But here you see the lifting cables. So, and it's funny because instead of like building a bridge over here to take them directly over to the Carbondale yards, you're bringing cars up. I think I have another picture that's farther down. Yeah, here we go. So here's the same plane. This is a stereo view of plane 28. Again, here's Colebrook is up here. Now you've got a series of cars down here at ground level. Why would you bring cars up the plane from the other side to then send over to Carbondale? But again, this is plane 28. Do we say this is plane 28A to plane 28B? How many planes do we have here? To me, there's 2. Again, one of the mysteries of the gravity. Now, we're sitting on the trestle you just saw where the cars were going over. You're on the gravity trestle, and if you got out right now, you could go down to Pete's Manor, Pete's at the Manor for dinner, because that's where you'd be sitting. So you're sitting the gravity trestle, and you're looking over at the O&W trestle, and the O&W station is where the Carbondale post office is. So again, another set of high works. You can either ride the gravity flying over Carbondale, or you could ride the O&W flying over Carbondale.
There's a reason why they built that trestle.
Which one?
The O&W trestle.
Well, the D&H wouldn't give them the rights, right?
The city of Carbondale will not let the O&W go through their track roll.
Right, yeah.
That's the reason why they had to build that trestle.
Yeah, and it's a whole long trestle that they had to put in.
Because they were the last railroad to come to the...
Yeah, 1890 is when they opened. So that we know that this is after 1890 because that's when they opened up the Scranton division.
Yeah.
And here we are, we're back at the plane number 1. The gravity is being, obviously you see, we're at the point of the gravity being dismantled. These guys are, bidding us goodbye because they say, well, the gravity is closing down. And so they took a group shot at the bottom of plane number 1. Here's the Carbondale yards. These buildings were all behind what's the Ben Mar at one time. They were torn down not too long. Well, there was a fire at one time, and then they were torn down not too many years ago. Which broke my heart because I always thought that would be a great place to have like a little mall and call them the Gravity Shops. But again, I don't always get my way, And one of the last photos is a mystery. Again, we're dismantling the gravity. I've been telling you all along, I've shown pictures to people. I've tried to get things answered. Now you see this whole thing right here, this massive steel, whatever it is. I've shown it to engineers, I've shown it to gravity experts, I've shown it to other railroad people. We have no idea what this is. I've looked at pictures of the gravity yards to see if it was something that maybe stood up in the yard. No, it doesn't. And you've got this, whatever this is on the bottom here. Now you also have, we were talking about, does something run underneath? Do the cables run underneath? You have this trench here. What is the purpose behind this trench? It's a quite large trench there also, because this is the bottom of plane 1. The cables are disconnected, everything is disconnected, we're dismantling the gravity. What is this? And the guys felt the need to stand on there to pose, but again, we don't know. I wish we did. And like I said, most of these, at one time I owned every picture in this presentation. This is one of the pictures I recently sold to the next generation of historians, and hopefully they can figure this all out. Because, and I tell this to every presentation I do, go home, write things on the back of your pictures, because what you know now, future generations will not know. Nothing is written on the back of these pictures. I make it a point to always write something on the back to, you know, so that we can identify it. And that would have helped identify it. I mean, we do know it's the Gravity. Here's the Gravity shops in the back, but it was all part of a series of photos I bought of the later years of the Gravity. So, we are dismantling the poor Gravity, and thank you for attending, and I hope the 4C Historical Society also thanks you. I thank them. And we're back in Carbondale.
I'd really like to thank John Revak the second time for this wonderful presentation. John really has...
I do this because I love history. I mean, I've never gotten, you know, I've been doing this for how many years, over a 3-county area, and I've never gotten, it's a matter of, I think it's important.
It is important. That's why we have this building. That's why people like John, and Kevin, and everyone else in here, my brother Matt, Bob Wertz, and all of us, we're so interested in preserving the history of our town and what came before us. So we really need your help, and it's great to see people like Eric Bennett here with his family and his children. They're learning about the history of the area. This is so important. We really do appreciate you coming, and we always appreciate your donations. So again, I'd like to thank John, and we have a schedule out. You can check our website. You could. It's going to be posted in banners posters and things in town, and it'll be in papers of upcoming events for the rest of the summer. So please try and attend. We have music. Possibly going to have another murder mystery dinner in the fall, and we have different musicians coming. Please try to just at least check it out. You can't come to everything. We understand that. You have other obligations, but anything you can attend is greatly appreciated, because we're trying to keep this history and this building and everybody here that has an interest in it going forward. We don't want to go backwards. We want to go forward. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next presentation. Thank you.